Welcome to the Mastering Commercial Real Estate Podcast, the show where we dive deep with top investors, operators, and industry pros to uncover how they're building wealth and creating real impact through commercial real estate. I'm your host, Cory Mortensen, capital raiser, commercial investor, and founder of 19 Holdings. Whether you're just getting started or looking to level up, this podcast is your go-to for real insights and actionable strategies. If you enjoyed the show, please hit that like button, leave a quick review, and share it with someone who should be listening. If you've got feedback or ideas to improve the show, I'm always open and I want to make this better for all you listeners. If you're ready to start building wealth passively through commercial real estate, visit 19holdings.com. That's ONE-9 Holdings to learn more and join our investor list. Enjoy this episode. All right, everybody. Welcome to the next episode of the Mastering Commercial Real Estate Podcast. I'm your host, Cory Mortensen, in my brand new, still work in progress studio. So all the people watching on video, please don't mind the mess. And my ring light died seconds before I hit record. So sorry for the quality. We're getting it going. But I have a really exciting guest today. I have Andy McMullen, who is the CEO of Legacy Acquisitions. And I'm very excited to dive into his experience, his background. And Andy, welcome to the show.
Yeah, it's great to be on with you, Cory. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, so let's just dive right into it. Tell us, a little bit about yourself, where you're from, where you live, and how you got started in real estate.
Yeah, well, let's just start where I got started. I was actually at UCLA with really no job prospects. All my friends were paper millionaires working in Silicon Valley. I know I'm aging myself a little bit, but that's about when I came up. And when my buddy started working at this kind of small investment firm doing real estate in Marina del Rey, Los Angeles, and asked me if I wanted to come on board and work on the leasing side with a large project that they had at that time. Was Universal was the ultimate resident, but it was called the Arboretum Gateway. And so I came in after school, and from then just kind of started working on other types of projects, got into development maybe 5-10 years later. I'm working on some stuff in Venice. And then from then really focused on real estate. A lot of the apartments we liked. I worked on stuff in industrial, worked on stuff in office. But over the last 10, 12 years, it's mostly been on residential, multifamily, investment. And over the last 6 years, we've kind of dug in a little bit deeper into the built to rent trend, which we'll get into a little bit later. But yeah, I'm here in San Diego, spend most of my time with the 3 tykes that I've got and just enjoying my team. I'm really blessed with what we've got going on now. So I'd love to dig in with you when you're free.
Yeah. Yeah. And as far as deal volume, how much have you done to date? What is the current portfolio looking like in terms of what you have now?
So we've got about 2,000 units. So we've been owning a lot of apartments in the South. We do have some in California. California makes it a little bit more difficult. So we've got some stuff in San Diego, Southern California, some in Fresno in the middle of the state, but mostly Texas, Alabama, Louisiana, North Carolina, Kentucky. Those are kind of our markets. And now I think we're up to, 600 or so assets under management, million under management, but really trying to simplify that. I know people talk about kind of the assets under management. That does take a lot of time, but we've got a lot of projects now that over the last 5 years are probably taking most of our time because that's the entire development process, right? From optioning the land to disposing it. So that's probably taken most of our focus.
And you've got properties kind of all over the country. Obviously you probably started in your backyard. Am I assuming that correct?
Correct. Yeah, that's correct. I would say I don't know that I would recommend that. I think it depends on kind of where you are. I definitely think having healthy relationships with people in your backyard, meetups, other investors, because you need to have people that trust you, whether you're going to be raising for projects outside of the state that you're in. But in California, where I'm at, Cory, as you know, there's a lot of regulation. So we could never develop the projects that we've got now with our cycle of 18 months to go from raw dirt to horizontal, having the infrastructure and utilities all in. In California, that would be a 3-4 year project. So I think you kind of have to consider where you are. Like when you in Texas or, other markets in the South, you're going to be, you've got your pick, right? You've got a development friendly, for the most part, state. You've got a lot of investors, a lot of money that's flowing through there. I know you have projects in Texas. Are you living in Texas too? I can't remember.
So, yeah,
Yeah.
our all of our projects are in Texas,
Yeah. Yeah.
and my business partner, who is the boots on the ground guy, manages all the properties and
Right.
all of the operations. I'm on a lot of the investor relations, capital raising, admin side, pretty much everything that you can do remote. And I live in Charleston, so I've been in Charleston
Charleston.
for
That's right. That's right.
yeah, South
So,
Carolina for about a year.
in those markets, people want you there, right? And they make it a little bit easier to build affordable housing if that's what you're building, or in industrial. In some of those states, it's a little bit more difficult. So I do think to a degree you want to understand your backyard, but you might find that a lot of the money in your backyard doesn't have to go to deals in your backyard. So it kind of comes down to really simplifying the relationships, of course, which people hear hundreds of times. But my take is if I were to start over again, I think I might look at other markets outside of California, because I spent a lot of time in Venice beating our head against a wall just on neighborhood councils and a lot of the politics that were involved. They don't love new housing.
Yeah, development and you started in development, correct?
I started really more on the leasing and then kind of office buildings, but then since 2004 or 5 we've been working in development. Yeah.
Yeah, so given that length of time that you've been in real estate, and we talked about this on our pre-show call about how you've been through a couple of real estate cycles already. I mean, you were rocking and rolling on development in California in '04. So you had a
Yeah.
good amount of lead time until, the Great Recession in 2008, 2009. What did that do to your business and your outlook in real estate?
Well, I mean, you can see it all over my face, Cory. I mean, all these scars are from these cycles. Um, what I will say is people that kind of lived through those cycles, real estate didn't really even come back. 2007, 2008 hit, right? And that was a huge crunch for everybody. But really, it didn't come back until 2011, 12. So you think about this time frame. Now it's compressed as I look back, but at the time, it's really kind of I tell people this all the time. What localized market can you find some unfair advantage, even in a down cycle? So every real estate market is cyclical. Every real estate area is cyclical, and there's an ascending market and there's a descending market. So we like to kind of globalize sometimes and talk in macro terms, even now, about tariffs and insurance and all, interest rates, right? There's these things to pay attention to for sure. And there's my thoughts on them as well. We can get into them if you want. But ultimately, there's opportunities within these cycles because of that downturn.
Yeah, and it's a big time piece of advice that when people are, it's a Warren Buffett quote, right? When people are panicking, buy. When people are greedy, don't buy. And that run up before the '08 crash, I mean, everything was going, especially on the residential side, which is more or less your focus. And what were some of the wins in the market before the '08? Because everything was going gangbusters prior to, and I can't remember what the stretch was before that, how long that run up was, the bull run
Yeah.
until the crash. How long was that for?
Well, I mean, I think if you think about, there was probably, I came in the business in the late '90s, so there was probably kind of a little bit of a correction, not really on development, but certainly in commercial real estate in the 2000, right? You had kind of the stock market crash in 2000, and then you had even 9/11. You had kind of another correction, right? So in that aftermath. But in general, if you look at it kind of in a macro sense and you were to see all these little dips, in general, from that 2001 to 2007 stretch, and even through the '90s, right? You had, you've probably heard stories about all of the tech companies that were in our office buildings, but like we had, gosh, now you kind of blank on them, but you know what I mean. You had e-toys and e-pets and all these large companies. So, but what I think that I took away from that, and it falls back to another quote that Buffett had, was if you could kind of pick your college friends, you put them in a room and you said, I'm going to find that guy that I want to have 10% of his earnings for the rest of his time, right? And so you would consider, oh, here's all the smarties, right? Here's all these guys, really sharp thinkers, right? And then there's these doers, and then there's maybe these guys that just they make things happen, but they're always living on the edge, right? And if they make things happen, you don't want them to make things happen because you know they're going to get you in trouble. So what I've kind of taken away is that there's these people on your team that have mettle, that can kind of get you through these things. And if you've got strong relationships within your organization, some of those guys just might be killers on the conscientious part, some of them on the strategic part, is that it is about adjusting over time. And there's so many corrections that people can kind of get caught up with. I'm not raising capital because there's no capital out there, or there's no deals out there, or interest rates are nothing pencils. They put it down, but there's always ways, right? There's a deal which can get underwritten through seller financing, which changes the complete strategy, or there's an ascending market that's in the path of progress that you just need to find the right partner to carry that asset for a little bit longer. So, to bring it back to 2004, 2005, yes, maybe you could seem smarter because things were easier. But as you mentioned, the Warren Buffett quote, and when we could do this whole thing about Buffett, but he talks about what is it going to look like when the tide changes? There's going to be a lot of people left naked because they were just winning for so long. So those are the things that you kind of have to think about. Even in good times, we tend to result too much. Let's think about, like, maybe we won, but how could we have done it differently? So those kinds of things.
Right. And the same kind of thing happened, again in 2020 and through 2023, let's call it, with the other bull run in real estate. For you, seeing these market changes and going through a few cycles and all the changes that have happened in real estate to date, and a lot of them have happened kind of very quickly, very fast in the last handful of years with the advancement of more technology adoption and these bigger companies getting involved in more institutional approaches to the investment side of everything and pulling down these commercial real estate deals, development deals. Where do you see market cycles going in the future? Because traditionally, real estate was a very, kind of slow moving, archaic, predictable industry where the headwinds are pretty clear and there's kind of a handful of signals that you pay attention to. Now, with so many things going on, so many changes in the industry, namely technology, do you feel that's going to speed things up a little bit and turn these traditionally 5 to 10-year cycles into 3 to 6-year cycles? Or tell me a little bit about how you feel about that.
Yeah, I mean, I got thoughts on all of it. I think that in general, Peter Linneman is a great economist that if I recommend people look him up. He's kind of a little bit of a contrarian, but always talking about kind of where we are today and compared to, where we were. And so technology is a big part of it. But he was asked the question, hey, look, if you were to stay rich, get poor, or get rich, what asset classes would you be investing in based on the technology that we've got now? So he would say, if you want to stay rich, you're going to be investing in multifamily and built to rent, right? Those are kind of like classes that people need housing, and we've still got 4 million units that were underdeveloped. And of course that makes sense. If you want to get rich, maybe now you consider looking back at office, because people are starting to come back to work. And even with technology, you've got folks that want to be back in some of them are just being required to, right? If you want to have a job in tech, you got to be there to work with your team. And then if you want to get poor, you invest in data centers. Now, I don't know if I agree with that, but you do understand kind of how this shifts, right? You've got AI, which is this technology that everybody loves and believes in, and you've got maybe 7 or 8 companies that are doing it really well, but you've got billions and billions of dollars being poured into these data centers that will never actually that will never actually use the power of those 7 companies. So you're going to have some correction, right? And that's kind of what we all talk about. Yeah, it'd be great if I knew that, in 2000 that Google was going to be the guy and it wasn't Netscape or Yahoo. But I think to your point, yes, there's trends within these cycles that will be accelerated with technology, but it ultimately is going to be about how well can those asset classes operators within those trends adjust, right? For example, and maybe I'll let you, maybe I'm taking over a little bit too much on the built to rent stuff, but I think there is a technology piece of that for your generation, you don't care as much about the white picket fence and saying that you own a home as you may by owning companies on your phone, owning stocks on your phone, owning crypto, and living in a home that's brand new with walking trails and amenities and a place for your dog and beautiful ladies to meet, right? And there's no stigma about who's living in the rented house in the neighborhood because they're all nice. So that's something that's kind of technological that's changed with prop tech, et cetera, that I could see being a trend that will ultimately grow exponentially over the many years.
Yeah, and something that I've discussed a lot with me and my friends is kind of there's kind of the two different headspaces and schools of thought on home ownership, I believe, and it kind of starts, I'm 29 right now, and I'm at the bottom end of the millennial generation, and the home ownership, yeah, definitely is not such a driving force as it used to be, just because one, it's just prohibitively expensive now. I mean, maybe prior to 2020, 2019, it was, doable on a mass scale. But now with how expensive homes are, it's tough because the wages haven't gone up very much and you have to have a huge amount of money to put down on these homes where I'm an opportunity cost type of guy and this isn't the school of thought that is on a massive scale by any means, but that money can be better put to other things. And especially in the millennial and Gen Z, very experience based interests and schools of thought, they would rather put that money into those things instead of just being hyper conservative and shelling up until you can buy a home, which then once you do that just leads to a bunch of other problems. So that's kind of the evolution of this build to rent business, which has been booming in recent years and had a lot more demand because of that. And I feel like you are in that space. You have to be able to pivot because it has changed so much. And you said it very well with you have to be a good operator because when the tide is rising, everybody looks good. But when it pulls away, you have to have your wits about you and be able to pivot and adapt to the market. And so for you and your team, how did you start hiring people to fill in some of these gaps and grow your team? What was the first hire that you made?
Yeah, what's so interesting is for folks that are out there that are young in business, I tell them that what will change your life is a powerful executive assistant. And I mean that in the sense that they they change your life in because they're smart, they can start to absorb the information over time. And if they're organized right, your entire EOS is what we use, entrepreneurial operating system. Your whole operating system is improved. And if you can kind of start from there and thinking strategically with somebody like that, that would be the first hire. Then I think you got to have your COO, right? And that is somebody that frees you up so that you can be on podcasts like this or going networking events. And as you know, with any business, Cory, it's about relationships. When it started to become apparent that people are going to be paying $2,000 more for their mortgage on maybe a 1980s 90 house where you alluded to it, that's just getting the house. Now you've got all the property insurance and taxes. And so that's, that's one thing, but then you got all the maintenance and then you got this older house. You can kind of see how over time partnerships with people that one understand scaling the business, right? Because as you know, real estate in and of itself, each entity is its own separate business. We don't do business in Foley, Alabama in the same way that we do business in California on our assets here. But those people that you've got on your team, if you care, we've got COO, right? We've got the guys that understand just accounting, right? So and with real estate, you've got investors, you've got a lot of, oversight and compliance that you got to worry about. But then what I think is the rarest is good sales guys, right? Those guys are hard to find in the sense that you've got to have a combination of people that are willing to raise capital, right? When that's pretty rare, as you know. And I think you've done some of that. So your skill set is probably in and of itself something very, very spectacular when you meet all the other people. But in addition, most of those people are good at the engagement part of the relationships, but not good at the follow-up. And so it does take a very special kind of character personality for those things.
And how would you rate yourself in the relationship nurturing aspect of strengths and weaknesses? Because I want to dive into that on your end and kind of turn the spotlight back onto you and yourself. What do you feel like your strengths are and
Yeah,
what your
it's
weaknesses
interesting.
and
I'm
how you
at
complement it?
29. If I had kind of your talent and skill set, I would lean in much more to the relationships. I think I was naturally pretty good at it, but I didn't care about it enough. Like I didn't realize now I'm in my second, they call it the halftime of my life. I know that every single great opportunity first came from God, but him putting somebody that could help me succeed, right? I didn't have the capital. He provided. I didn't have the deals. I needed a partner that provided. And all of those were because of relationships. Now, it might be depth of relationships. It might not be somebody who just goes to every networking event and has kind of a surface, knowledge of what people are working. It might be something more deep. But it is the number one thing. And I know for a lot of people on my team that are introverts, and I would say if I was to do to my MBTI, I'm like an ENTJ, but a slight extrovert. I wouldn't say that I'm like a overt extrovert. And I'm probably a turbulent as opposed to like a aggressive. I can't remember what the A was for, but meaning that I'm sensitive to the people, right? Like that part of that matters to me. So maybe I get a little bit offended or maybe I'll get a little bit uptight on something, but for the most part, to me, that's why I think the culture in our company is strong. And we've got a lot of problems, and as I said, everything's on board if you want to get into them. But the culture part, it's not created by me or the dictums of leadership. It's by the people that you bring into the organization.
Yeah, that's huge. And when you're hiring, do you do a personality test on the people that are coming in and just kind of help figure out where they fit into the puzzle?
Yes, and we use Working Genius, which is the Pat Lencioni. But I've also done Ray Dalio has a great one. Principles U. I don't know if you've done that one, and then just the simple MBTI. And some people like the DISC. I kind of I like doing a couple with our team and having them, again, these are preferences. So what I want Cory to be energized throughout his day is not doing things that he might be fine or competent in, but he's not energized by them. Like he might not be inspired by actually finishing a project and being relieved because you know that it's ongoing, right? And that if you got to $3 million to finish your raise, you know that you've got a project behind it. So you do woo woo, and then you got your next 5 things down the road, right? So some people are really energized by accomplishing these tasks, and they love that feeling of checking off something on their to-do list. And so you want all those people on your team. So I think yes, that's the first answer, is having those. Now the next thing is, how do you integrate those personalities on your team so that you are optimizing, right? You almost kind of need to throw all of those Working Genius reports into AI and say, where would we be deficient, knowing that we've got these competencies? Where would we be deficient as a team? Where should we maybe, point our energy? So you could kind of really even, take it a few steps further now with technology and really, really kind of, help your team grow as a unit, as opposed to worrying about, am I pissing off Cory about this thing or that thing because I didn't approach him the right way, right? That's a purpose of it, but it's not the purpose of it.
Yeah, and it's tricky because managing people is such a core part of keeping the business going and keeping things running smoothly, because there's the two things that we've talked the most about is, the relationships and people, and managing people in your team. And those are some of the most powerful things. I mean, there's a lot of things that move the sales in a business, any business really. And that's why I like to talk about these things, because it's so applicable to all of the industries, no matter what. You're not just real estate. These are truths no matter where you go. And you've actually kind of inspired me to go. I might go and do my personality test or the disc, or I did a handful of them straight out of college, and they were really enlightening and really cool to see that on paper. And you agree with it. You're like, yeah, that does make sense, and it'll explain some of those things. So if you're listening and you haven't done any of those, go and spend the money. They're a little expensive, not crazy expensive, but definitely worth the time to check out and learn a little bit more about yourself and your preferences. And my preferences have definitely changed over the last almost decade. So I would love to see how they kind of compare now versus before. But
And
for
and
you,
is it interesting too for you to know what your teammates are energized by and what they're not, right? Like that part of it when I was kind of learning how to really I didn't have the models for real estate, right? So I'd spend time and I'd sit at the office and I would hate it. And I'd just try to figure out on the 10B calculator, which is like just a cash flow calculator, right? And I remember thinking like I didn't have if I would have been able to communicate with somebody else to show me, or I wouldn't have been afraid to ask, or I would have been almost kind of protected by them knowing that this is not what energizes me. Like I wouldn't be pissing them off by being slow on something, or I wouldn't have been coming in so frustrated because I spent so much time on that when I wasn't doing the things that energized me. I was doing things that enervated me, and then I'm not as good at my job. So it helps too for your team to know that. So
yeah, the human resources is something, a skill that I don't think people think about enough, and it's easy to kind of push to the wayside because it's not an exact science, and there's a lot of science. I mean, the things we just talked about are the science behind it, but it's a
right.
definite art and a little bit of luck as well.
And then I just want to basically put pins because I think it's important for people to think this is not us discovering who you are. We will not know the depths of you. But if you take like an Enneagram and you're an 8, which is like leadership kind of commander type, and then you go to another test and you see a commander, you start to see trends of things that you probably are or that other people see you as. And that's important because you're dealing with people. And if you want to build on relationships, that stuff is important to be able to communicate in the way that hey, I've got a blind spot. I'm just letting you know, Cory, for right now, that sometimes I'm not jazzed by like the completion of a project. So I'm not going to offend you when I say, okay, what's next? Right? As opposed to celebrating. Just simple things like that.
Yeah, no, I think those small things can be huge in an organization. Switching gears a little bit, what would you say in your career has been your greatest accomplishment?
Uh, yeah, man. I want it's hard to take credit for it because as I just mentioned earlier, a team is really built by the people. So I could have made some really horrible hires and stuck too long with some of them, or I had some luck, right? Like for whatever reason, the people that God put me in touch with turned out to be people that would ultimately build our culture. So our company is faith based. So a lot of the things that we do is for communities that were if we're in Lafayette, Louisiana, we want to have a community resource officer that's going to be putting together community events and is going to be having, Bible studies, is going to be, putting picnics together. Some of them completely just bringing people together. As I said, that's what I feel that I'm strongest by, even when I don't feel like it. I know that I'm built up I'm kind of propped up by community and people around me. And that's what I think God wants for us. And I think that it ultimately creates a better product for our investors because the residents stay longer, they do more, they're helping each other. So if there's kind of a 50,000-foot view accomplishment that I'm proud of, it is that in the communities that we've invested in, we've built more than just community in the sense that we put it on our website, but community in the sense that I know Cory and his family, and we play football with his kids, etc.
Love that. I love that. And for new investors, when they are getting into the industry, the market, whether it's on a professional level or a single individual investor, what are some of the most common mistakes that new commercial real estate investors make, and how can they avoid them?
Oh man, I just think about the millions that I've made, and so like trying to be so reductive as to turn it into a couple things here and there. But I will say one thing that I try to tell people is that you do have to trust yourself more, because most of the time you will go to a meetup or you'll get an advisor or something like that, and they have their own experiences, right? Like, you're going to give me a problem, and I'm basically going to give you what I think your problem is based on the problems that I've had. And so sometimes you bring a deal and you'll say, hey, look, I've looked at it this way, I've looked at it that way. And I'll tell you, yeah, but you know what? Forgot about this. And then I'll be focusing on that. So if I was to start over in my younger days, I gave way too much credit to maybe smart, maybe even experts, but way too much credit to their opinion when I had done the work. So if you're doing the work, yes, part of doing the work is talking to other people, but ultimately you have to trust yourself with what you know in order to move that forward or decide to move on to the next thing.
Yeah, and that's a really wise piece of advice. And one of the questions I do ask more really towards the end of the show is, what if you could go back in time to any point in time of your life and give yourself advice, is that the same advice that you would give yourself?
Yeah, I think so. And I also think that get over yourself is just such a great advice, because it is like, if I could have been more comfortable doing this earlier, like getting on podcasts or getting on stages or talking to people about what I thought about things, I probably would have felt a little self-conscious, and I probably would have got some feedback. Well, you fumbled this or you fumbled that, and maybe it would have hurt my ego. But ultimately, that stuff doesn't matter. And we talked about Warren Buffett a lot in this podcast because most of it's wise. But he said the one thing that I would have as a young person is to take a public speaking course, because these are things that actually help you in life. And so I think that, yeah, get over yourself and stop being kind of a weenie. I don't know if you can say that anymore, or wussy, or I don't know what you can say and you can't say anymore. I just try, whatever I say to my kids. But that fear part is how you get better. It's not that your life gets easier. It's that working on the hard gets better. And that's what I try to tell my kids when they tell me, oh, school's over, etc. Working on the hard gets better. You get better at it.
I love it. That's a really tough thing to do. And you mentioned a couple of things, having a little bit of humility and being open to that and not being so attached to your ego. And that's going to allow you to be more empathetic to the people, because this is also a people business, and your work, especially build to rent, multifamily. I mean, these are people's lives and families and the place where they live. And so being open to, you can make mistakes and I'm working on them and I'm always working on being better, is what I think separates a lot of investors, because where a lot of people went wrong was very egotistical and very much, I can't mess up, and they will never admit to any wrongdoing. And we've all dealt with people professionally, a contractor, a person, a peer, boss, anything, who that they're in the wrong and they cannot admit it.
Mhm.
And I think when a person, a company, and the leadership can be open to that, that makes it a much more fluid company, a much more dynamic company, a much more peaceful company, and things will move a lot smoother inside the organization and out. But not to spend too
And
much more
and
time on
and
that. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Sorry.
well, I just do want to say one thing, that when I was younger, there'd be a smart person that have opinion. He wasn't smarter than the collective 10 or 12 of us, right? We just kind of resigned the fact, because they were the leader or because they were the squeakier wheel, or maybe they even had some insight, that we should just all. So, and what happens is, you've seen all the movies, right? You see what happens to Uber, or the downfall of any company that runs it that way. We work usually because of a couple of persons, not because of their intelligence. They probably had incredible vision, strategy, but they self-destruct because we are human. It's the way that he made us. And that's why you need the people around you to check you when your ego is a little bit too hot.
Yeah, it always helps to be a little bit flexible as a person. Back to the investing insight, when you're looking at deals and you're seeing if a deal is worth it, going through the risk assessment, how do you evaluate potential deals and decide if they're worth pursuing? What are some of the
Yeah.
green flags you want? What are some of the red flags that you stay away from, especially in the build to rent, because that's a space that I'm not so much knowledgeable about.
Yeah. I think if people listen, I won't bore you with an example because I think that it probably, well, this is on screen, so maybe it will come through, but yield on cost. So really what I care about as an investor is I look at a deal in North Carolina, for instance, I want to know how much I'm going to have to pay for all of it, everything, the land, the cost, right, of the infrastructure, the cost of the vertical, which is the unit build, all of that. So lumber, concrete, whatever we're using, throw that all into a bucket. That's my total cost. And then I want to go and I want to look at all the rents. What is the market rent that I can get for this and the ancillary revenue for pet rent or dog yoga or whatever it is you want to do. And I put that into kind of a revenue stream model. I know that my expenses are going to be about 35 to 39% for built to rent. They're usually a little bit lower, but because people stay longer and the turnover is lower. But so I want to put that, whatever that NOI is, whatever that net on income after they're stabilized is, I want to divide that by the total cost of everything that I put into it. And that's what they call the yield on cost. And then you have to consider that against what people call a spread. And the spread is how much, where is your interest rate's going to be, where your cap rate's going to be. All of those are kind of taken into account against your yield on cost. So as interest rates go up or cap rates go up, that spread becomes thinner, and why you hear a lot of people saying that they can't make their deals work as much. So that's kind of the consideration. And then how much can we affect the lift, meaning the development lift, if we put our own team, our own kind of unfair advantages into this project? What kind of margins do we think we can create? So that's kind of, I don't know if that, I think that's kind of what you were asking. How do we evaluate deals? But maybe that was a little more than you cared about hearing.
No, that's perfect. That's exactly what we're interested in. Yeah, I mean, the different approaches to different assets are the nuances can be really interesting, and the knowing how each deal is valued and how the operators look at things differently between build to rent versus multifamily versus office versus a straight up development, commercial or office multifamily development. These are the things that are massively valuable to hear, just because even if it's not your asset class, being knowledgeable about how these other things work is going to pay off in the long term, because you may have to pivot into some of these different assets as things change.
And by the way, I think yield on cost is something more people, even in the multifamily space, should look at. Like people, we talk about our going in cap rate, and we talk about what's our NOI, and how much over time are we going to need to spend on our capital expenditures. Really, just take that big bucket of all of your expense and what kind of stabilized rent, what stabilized income stream is that going to give you? That really applies to your business, real estate, etc. And I think people get caught up kind of on the cap rates and cash flow, and all those are important. But at the end of the day, are you going to be able to bring enough value to something? And you got to kind of consider what it is that you're creating that value and how you're getting there.
Real estate investing can be quite competitive. What sets you apart from other investors, and how do you maintain an edge in the markets, deal finding, and within your company?
Yeah, it's kind of one of those things again. It kind of it's like me trying to determine what Cory is about. It's ultimately Cory and his team and his work ethic and his track record, and it's all of these elements that are kind of put into one. But you know what? I just hate that asset class. Or you know what? he's 29. I want to invest with gray hair. So in this world, I'm kind of, it's good to have gray hairs in investing real. It's good to have these kind of scars. It's good to have these kind of stories of failure. So that's kind of hard to kind of, deconstruct. But I think ultimately it does come down to the strength of the track record, the fact that we are well capitalized to kind of get through some of these cycles, and the culture that we've kind of have as a team. That would be separators.
Yeah, your experience and your time in the market in real estate is definitely an advantage, and being able to utilize that across your team, that is obviously a great separator for you. And whether it's yourself, your company, how do you set goals, and what are you currently focused on?
You mean personally or real estate
Whatever.
wise?
Yeah,
Yeah.
whatever you're.
So I do spend some time. I'm part of a couple of masterminds that I think are really helpful at we do a strategic plan for our business every year. So we're always kind of pulling apart what's our key issue and synthesizing that so that we're always constantly reevaluating. And then personally, I have check-ins that I do. I think I'm a big fan of the morning time. I'm sure you've read Miracle Morning, but just the idea of being able to knock out the workouts, your journaling, your reading, all in that kind of span where you free your brain up by writing, you kind of free up that chaff, and now you can kind of think of things critically and clearly. So I do that daily. I think that's really helpful for me. And then quarterly, we use the Monday.com for our business, which kind of has the tasks. And then we use the entrepreneurial operating system, which has the rocks and tax and check-in and scorecard that we kind of monitor the business. So that's usually pretty helpful.
Incredible. No, that's great. Two quick questions and then we're done. So, if you weren't in real estate or decided to retire today, what would you be doing instead?
And you know what I always wanted to be was, and you probably doesn't resonate with you because you're younger, but a music producer when I was growing up was the thing. Like, like I could see myself on the big board, which no one has a big board anymore, with the sunglasses in, just trying to make music that people liked and bringing in new sounds. And I still play around on music, nothing on the production side, more just piano and guitar. But man, I never really wanted to kind of shortchange my love of music by having to make a living earning from it, but I would be a happy dude.
We have to chat more about that privately because I DJ, I do some music production as well. It's kind of my other hobby that I love doing, and it's tough to get away from that because it is a ton of fun. But I love that. I love hearing
And if
that.
you
We
can
had a
work it
couple other
into your
musicians.
life though, it just enriches it though, right? I mean, people should have additional things that they care about because it does make them a happier, more energized human.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Got to pay attention to yourself and your hobbies. I know you got to go, but one last piece of advice to get the people excited and ready to go after the podcast.
Oh, one more piece of advice. Okay. Take a look at your life, where you were, and think about all of those big moments that God kind of put these obstacles that ended up working out. Just map it all out from your life and think about how all of that, would you even trade it for some of that suck that you had to go through? And we all had our personal struggles, doesn't matter how old or what race, whatever. And just think about whether he was with you and if he's empowering you to kind of take your business or your life to the next level. And so what I'm ultimately getting at, Cory, is do you really have the faith in yourself and your work, your life's work and his vision for you? Can you really believe in it? And when you look back on your life and all those pieces that you thought, oh man, that girl, I thought I was going to marry her, he he cut me off from it. Now I'm happily married. Or man, I really wanted that job, but I didn't get it, and now it led to this and to this and this. When you start thinking about those God nods, you start looking at your life a little bit differently.
I love it. I love it. Everything happens for a reason, right?
That's right.
I love it.
That's
Well,
right.
Andy, thank you so much for being on today. It was an honor hosting you. And I hope everybody got a lot out of this. This is a very, very exciting episode, and I know people are going to take away a lot. So if you guys liked it, the listeners, go ahead, give us a like, give us a subscribe, follow Andy over at Legacy Acquisitions. Andy, thank you so much for being on today.
Cory, honor being with you, man. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, thanks everybody for listening. This is the latest episode of the Mastering Commercial Real Estate podcast. We'll see you soon. Well, that's a wrap for today's episode of the Mastering Commercial Real Estate podcast. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed the episode, go ahead and give it a like, leave a review, or share it with a friend. It really helps us grow and reach more people who want to master this space. If you have any feedback or ideas to improve the show, reach out, leave a comment. I'm always looking to make it better and tell us what you like or didn't like. And don't forget, if you're ready to start investing passively and want to learn more about upcoming commercial real estate deals, head over to ONE-9 Holdings. That's 19 Holdings, and join the investor list. Thanks again for listening, and I'll catch you on the next episode.